And welcome back to the Visionary Leaders Summit. My name is Nicole Farkouh, and I'm so pleased to be here today with Melissa Mendes Campos. She's a partner with the Piana Consulting Group, where she works with organizations as a sense maker and a strategic partner. Through her writing, she helps Piana uphold its commitment to knowledge sharing in the nonprofit sector. And she's the co-author of Convergence, How 5 Trends Will Reshape the Social Sector. And she's also currently contributing to a very exciting 10th anniversary edition of the Nonprofit Strategy Revolution, Real-Time Strategic Planning in a Rapid Response World, which a good portion of which is what we're talking about here today. And in fact, the title of our talk or conversation is How to Use Strategy to Cut Through the Noise During Times of Rapid Change. So Melissa, welcome. Thanks for joining today.
Thanks, Nicole.
And so, as we just sort of alluded to, we are living in a very rapidly changing environment. And we know that adaptability is really key for organizations to survive and even thrive during times like these. Can you talk a little bit about what real-time strategic planning is and how organizations can use that to respond and to be adaptive in the ways that they need to?
Absolutely. And, it's funny that we're coming up on our 10-year anniversary of it, because when we first conceived real-time strategic planning, it was as much a recognition of change happening more rapidly as it was to a recognition that, boy, that traditional kind of approach to strategic planning seemed not amenable to that kind of flexibility and sort of nimble response that nonprofits were needing more and more. And I mean, today it's even sped up, it keeps accelerating the pace of change. So we're very excited to see this kind of approach that we advocated for being taken on much more mainstream. There's lots of other, approaches to developing strategy on a more ongoing basis and being able to make decisions more rapidly and not get stuck, in analysis paralysis and sort of the, laundry list making of goal setting that can sometimes, come out of strategic planning efforts. So when we developed real-time strategic planning, it's a methodology based on basically 5 principles, and they provide a repeatable process for organizations to look at their strategy, develop strategy on an ongoing basis. So it provides both structure and flexibility. And the 5 steps that we sort of take organizations through is to first look at themselves, to know themselves as organizations, what they care about, what matters to them, what their business model looks like. The second piece is to know their market, obviously to look outside, to see what's going on in trends, in their competition, what's going on in their environment. The third is really to build on their strengths, and this adds to their knowledge of themselves is what do we do best? We talk about it as competitive advantage, which can be a little difficult for organizations to sometimes accept, being that we all like to collaborate, but it's really 2 sides of the same coin, which I hope to be able to talk about a little bit later. The fourth sort of process that we go through with them is to make decision-making criteria explicit. Before you have the questions in front of you, think about how you're going to make your decisions. Decide how you're going to decide. And then finally is to really hone in on what is that big question? What is the strategic opportunity or threat that you really need to respond to now? What's going to be the most important thing that's going to sort of, change or strengthen your organization's trajectory? So it's really about setting direction, which is, I think, where cutting through the noise helps. Yeah.
Absolutely. So, and I know also that a key piece of this model is a distinction between planning and strategy. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, we really tried to ask people to uncouple strategy from planning. And when we named the book, we had to call it Real-Time Strategic Planning, because if we called it something else, they wouldn't get that we really were talking about a process that organizations go through to develop strategy. We call it strategy development in our sort of internal kinds of conversations about process. Yeah. Because we've found that a lot of strategic plans went straight to goal setting and here's what we're going to do, and very tactical, and there wasn't a lot of strategy involved. So we're really trying to ask organizations to think hard about developing that strategy. What is the set of actions that's going to be aligned to move you in the direction that you want to move before you start figuring out the sort of to-do list of how to get there? You can do all the planning in the world, and if you don't have a strategy, it's not going to get you where you want to go. So, you really trying to start where you need to start.
Yeah. It's actually shocking to me that it's coming up on your 10-year anniversary, because this book has been so seminal. This approach has been so seminal in all the work that I've done as a consultant over the years. And every time I walk into a new organization, both in government and in nonprofit, people are always surprised when I'm like, well, there's a difference between strategy and planning. And for me at this point, it's like so clear, but like it's actually still a very new idea for so many people. And so many people are still really wed to the idea of the strategic plan. And it's like, please don't invest your time and money in creating this thing that's just going to sit on the shelf. Like, let's come up with this. I tend to generally refer to it as strategy formation. Like, let's form this like strategy that you can use and work with, and it can guide you in everything that you do, as opposed to like coming up with, as you said, this laundry list of goals and you check off the box, you know? So
absolutely. Yeah. It's not a rejection of planning, by any means.
Right.
Planning is sometimes very important, especially if it's a new venture. I mean, we're proponents of, business planning for things like new ventures where you really have to test things a lot more. Yeah. If it's, tweaking a current strategy or information, you can get to action a lot quicker without falling into a planning hole that you may not really need.
Right. Yes, exactly. So you plan, you have the strategy that allows you to get clear on like what you can deal with right now, and then what you do maybe need to plan for.
Mm-hmm, absolutely.
Yeah. And so what are some of the ways in your experience that concrete actions that people can take on a daily basis to sort of infuse their strategy into their way of, operating regularly?
Right. We've had the opportunity to get a little bit inside peek on that recently with the updates to the book, and with a little survey that we just did on our website asking folks what would make your strategy better. And a third of the responses we got was, we need to make it more part of our everyday operations and keep it alive. And so I did a couple of conversations with current and past clients about how are they keeping it alive. And they're really getting creative about it. And there's like, I think 5 sort of things, that I took away out of those is, one is the power of a one-pager, making it available to everybody. You got your plan, your framework. That's several pages, even in our GSP world. But coming up with a little cheat sheet of it and making it available to everybody who's actually doing the work is one step that both of these organizations had done. Having a champion who's going to be bringing it to meetings and making it a part of a continuing conversation with staff, making sure that it's linked to your budget, making sure that it's linked to performance sort of assessment of staff, is what you're doing contributing to the strategy or that part of the strategy that you're responsible for. Mm-hmm. So some of those things really helps keep it alive on a daily basis, and it takes habit, right? It's creating a habit. But of making it more alive and, keeping it from being that thing that sits on a shelf, but is actually sitting on someone's desk and is in the next meeting that they're going to be going to.
And I think actually even more than just making it a habit, like it does need to be a habit, but the process of making it a habit, in my experience, can feel a little artificial, because it's like, okay, here now it's time to do our strategy time or whatever you do, like our standing agenda item, and people can kind of feel cheesy about it, but then it actually is really powerful because oh, go ahead.
No, yeah, absolutely. I mean, it can be very helpful for folks. It does take that champion who's willing to be cheesy and go, what does the plan say? And refer people back to that, one pager, or be the one who stands up in the meeting and go, how are you doing according to our strategy? But I've also talked to organizations that, specifically with coming out with their strategy screen, which is, it's never set in stone. There are going to be things that happen to your organization that have to be responded to, or you have to at least decide whether you're going to respond. Mm-hmm. And just having those tools close to hand can aid in those ongoing conversations so that it is something that's happening in real time all the time.
Right. And I think part of the beauty of adding it into sort of the structures that frame the daily interactions of staff in an organization is that it kind of keeps alive those conversations that happen during the formation process or during the strategy development process, which can be so exciting for people because, so like enlivening. And so then once you get over the cheesy hump, like it can actually sustain the energy of those conversations into the ongoing work.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Because it is exciting work. It is important work.
Right. Yeah. Right. Exactly. So, so can you talk a little bit about the board's role in the strategy?
Yeah. The board is integral to strategy formation. I mean, part of their role as a board is to help guide the organization's overall direction. And so their involvement in the strategy process is critical, whether it's the whole board in the room sort of developing it, or whether they're just kind of brought together at a recommendations phase. Having that buy-in is what makes it powerful. I just had exchange with an executive director that we worked with, and she was saying how having that strategy with the board's buy-in behind it gave her permission to make some really critical changes for the organization. And so their role is just, it can't be overstated. So having that involvement through the process, having their stamp of approval on it, making sure that, I think part of the advantage also of the real-time strategic planning approach is it helps to separate the process from the plan. So it's not so much a product, it's the process that you've gone through to all be on the same page. And that can be really powerful for staff and board to all get together on the same page through that process of strategy development, formation. It's captured in a plan, sure. We deliver, the framework that you take with you and, carry forward, but it's having gotten everybody aligned is really where the power is.
Yeah.
And that really enables leaders to be more courageous in doing what they have to do for their organization.
And in your experience, is it a risk for an organization to shift from sort of this more traditional strategic planning methodology to this more like the separation of the strategy and then the planning, and like this intent to have the strategy more alive, and the recognition that there's going to be constant interaction with it and tweaks based on it?
Yeah, I mean, I expect that there's definitely some discomfort involved. I think you still have, funders and, board members and other stakeholders who want that 3 to 5 year plan. And that's a hard sort of disposition to overcome. It also, you're buying into the idea that strategy is an ongoing task that you have to pay attention to. You can't just say, okay, we're done, dust off your hands and walk away. It's a conversation that you need to keep having. You need to keep, your eyes out on what's happening, and it's a commitment. But it can also be, I think, a lot more rewarding because you're having higher level quality conversations. I think a lot of people are good planners. We find comfort in making lists and developing, goals and 1, 2, 3 tactics to get there. That's a comfortable place to live. Developing strategy based on what you're seeing in the world and what your organizational strengths are, it takes kind of leaps of reason, or even taking chances, and that can be really uncomfortable, especially for nonprofits who are already under pressure. So it's an act of bravery, I think.
And so I would actually see that a strong board support of that could be really important in helping to overcome the fear, or to find the courage to actually step into that.
Absolutely, and I think it's for finding the courage for adopting this kind of more flexible process, but then also for adopting an edgier strategy, or something that takes that chance. If you're not prepared to take on a potentially different kind of process to get there, how prepared are you to make a hard decision when it comes to your strategy too? So
that's a really good point. And can you talk a little bit also, before we got started, you kind of shared with me some insights about the importance of the relationship between the board chair and the CEO or the ED of organizations. Like, can you share a little bit about that with our audience?
Absolutely. That relationship can really be key because, we just talked about, it's so important to have the board engaged and on board, and I'm sure there's executive directors going out there going, when it comes to the board, it's a challenge. There's, I think, a history of feeling like there's a bit of adversarial relationship, or I want to keep my board in their lane. So when it comes to board staff relationships, we often talk about role definition. You do this and you do that. And yes, it's very important. But I think that getting beyond that to look specifically at the executive and board chair relationship and take on a sense more of shared ownership, shared responsibility can be really powerful. And in that way, executives, they have an ally on the board. They have a peer on the board who can help them set the tone, who can help them get to where they need to go if they present a unified front. It also gives you a great sounding board. It can be very isolating being an executive position. So having that board chair who you can really trust, if you have a trusting relationship, that can, I think, really change the direction of your board, even over the long term as it comes to board development, board new recruitment. Having that ally gives you a lot more power to be able to move things.
Yeah, indeed. And just really briefly, are there any insights that you've seen, or like, I don't know, best practices is not exactly the right word, but successful things that CEOs and board chairs have done to develop that trusting relationship?
Right. We actually, some colleagues that did a session at Board Source this last fall on the board CEO relationship. And one of the exercises they did was actually taking groups of CEOs and board chairs in separate rooms and ask, what do you need from your, counterpart?
Yeah.
And just exploring those kinds of, desires and concerns and having those conversations. So I think you can do that in a dyad with your board chair and start asking about, what do you need from me? What can I, do to make your role, more comfortable? Because, board chairs have a lot of responsibility too. So just starting that conversation and prioritizing it, set a, monthly breakfast if you haven't done it yet, to just start exploring that with them and having some real conversations.
Yeah. And one of the other experts as part of the summit is going to be Renetta Walker from Board Source. And so we're definitely going to be diving into this more with her, but she's another resource for sure to amend everything that you're offering right now, which is really great.
Great.
All right, so I'm going to sort of change tracks. Oh, no, before I do, I want to ask you one other question. So we talked about in this model, there's separation of strategy from planning and the different form that process can take. But then you also did say, and planning is still really important. And so what does planning look like when in connection with the real-time strategic planning process?
Right. So I think by separating the strategy and planning piece, we can sort of ask ourselves a little bit more pointedly, planning for what? So is it a really brief implementation plan to get us started? Is it kind of a 90-day operational action, plan that we need? Or have we come up with a new strategy that really makes us need to dive deeper into something like a business planning, where you're really testing some assumptions and doing some financial modeling and going deep based on a strategy that's already been, sort of decided. So you kind of have that break where you go, all right, we're committed enough to delve into this planning, because then it's worth it. Because then you can really go in there and start taking it apart and doing it. But it's sort of being able to gauge at that point, once you've got a strategy developed, how much planning do we need? What kind of planning do we need? And then start, doing it and defining it.
So it's like planning contextualized, like planning to a specific end as opposed to just planning for the sake of planning.
Because it's about the action. You want to get from the strategy to the action. So what kind of plan do you need to bridge that gap? Yeah.
Awesome. Okay, great. Now I'm going to change topics. So I want to talk a little bit. I know that La Piana does some really interesting work around collaborations among organizations and within the sector. And so I'm wondering if you can talk about how organizations can set themselves up for success when deciding to pursue collaborations, and even when they might consider collaborations.
Absolutely. Yeah, collaboration is a huge part of what we do. And I think it's important to remember collaboration is a strategy, so to contextualize it within your list of other kinds of decisions that you're making when you're going through a process like real-time strategic planning or the kinds of strategy formation is collaboration on the table as you're looking at your competitive advantage, which, I said is sort of something that in our process, we try and get organizations to think about in terms of their strength. What do you do that's different and better than anybody else? Mm-hmm. That's the same thing as defining your niche in an ecosystem of other organizations with whom you might collaborate. So it's really two sides of the same coin, this competition collaboration piece. And so knowing your strengths, I think, is a good first step for, understanding what kind of collaboration is going to advance your goals, what's going to get you to where you need to go. Is it the right strategy for doing what you need to do? And I think one of the cautions that we put out there is to try and get folks not so focused on what the collaboration looks like as to what are you trying to achieve with it first, is focusing on the why. Because there's, any number of kinds of forms that your collaboration can take. Our collaborative map, maps out like 15 different kinds, and other people have, done all different kinds of ways of categorizing these and characterizing them. But different kinds of collaboration have they're suited to different kinds of goals. So knowing your goals first will help you get to the form. So, definitely put the function before the form. And I think that's something that we try and encourage organizations to do, because we think it's really exciting when they can start thinking beyond their own organization and what might collaboration look like. And I think the necessity of being willing to put your mission first. It may not be the same form that, of organization that advances that mission if you're working with someone else in a really deeply integrated manner. But if it takes, collaboration to move your mission, being open to that, I think is really exciting that more and more organizations are open to it.
Yeah. And so what might an organization, like if they're having an internal conversation about, we think that collaboration might be appropriate for us, they first need to know what they're trying to accomplish and why, and then collaboration becomes a strategy for accomplishing that thing.
Absolutely.
But then say that they have a clear answer to what we're trying to accomplish, and actually it does feel like collaboration in this particular form of collaboration, maybe they reference your map on your website, which has like all these different kinds of collaboration laid out, and they have, okay, we're going to approach with this form. Like, how can they, what sort of internal work do they need to do to know if they're ready for that?
I think that's a critical question, because often collaboration sounds like, hey, it's a great idea. I'm getting a message from my funder. They want us to do it, and so all right, let's collaborate. And it is good to kind of take a breath, take a step back, think about what's going on in your organization. What assets are you bringing to the table, not just resource-wise, but in terms of what are your strengths? What are you offering in relationship with another organization or organizations? And what weaknesses are you trying to sort of fill in, or what complementary strengths are you looking for in a partner? And getting real about that, getting real about even just your ability to devote time to a process of reaching out to a potential partner, engaging in some initial conversation. It takes time to do this. Often a lot of the most successful collaborations that we've been involved with, there's been a pre-existing relationship. Mm-hmm. So if you don't already have a rapport with an organization, you're going to have to sort of start from square one and make some overtures and start the conversation in a safe, way that isn't, a hard pressure sale, but that starts the ball rolling about what could we be together, what could we do together, what could we achieve. And so the organization needs to be willing to sort of think about, do we have time to do this? Are we willing to devote, our attention toward building a collaborative relationship? I think is a good question.
And I'm curious also if you can speak to the mindsets that would support success as organizations move into a collaborative relationship. And I'm guessing that one of the things you mentioned earlier, maybe one of them in terms of the putting your mission first above even the sustainability or the current structure of your organization or something like that. So, a mindset of the most important thing ultimately is us making progress towards our mission.
Right. And that is often what carries a negotiation forward, because those get into some, really difficult kinds of conversations. And we're not just talking merger, but that's a lot of what our experience is as consultants.
Yeah.
And when those difficult conversations happen, reminding folks that the touchstone is the mission, that helps move folks through to problem solving and sort of resolving what an agreement can look like. So focusing on the why, thinking mission first. I think resource-wise too, there's some myths about, if we collaborate, we'll be able to do so much more with less. That there's a cost-saving kind of measure there, and it's really not that simple. I think that another sort of mindset to go into collaboration with is doing more with more. Really is because often collaborations allow you to really expand services or work in a new way. So while there may certainly be, some, efficiencies or improvements, a bigger organization also takes more infrastructure, or, more attention. So it's an investment. It's not, I think any organization or a pair of organizations who have merged and then gone to a funder and say, well, you can't just, offer us only one grant now instead of, if they've been a grantee of the organization before. That's the frustration, is that there's this kind of idea that, we'll be able to do it in half the amount of, resources. Work that way. But often it leaps organizations forward in terms of the kind of programming that they can provide, or their infrastructure really can, build and improve and provide a professionalized level of service they didn't have before. So it's really about the possibilities rather than the sort of deficit kind of thinking that nonprofits are often stuck in.
That makes a lot of sense. Well, we are coming to the end of our time, and so it's really been a pleasure to talk with you. And before I end our call, I'd love to ask you to talk a little bit about what you're making available to our audience in terms of the resource that you're offering.
Great. I was really excited to sort of hear the theme of your series, and in light of a new piece that we're rolling out. And so we're inviting people to come and learn a little bit about and sign up for a new blog series that we have coming out. It's called Black and Bold: Perspectives on Leadership. My colleague, Makia Moody, senior consultant at the firm, has really created, conceived, and is curating this new blog series with stories that are amplifying the voices of Black women leaders, and sort of sharing their wisdom, sharing their experience. And I think it's really inspiring for the theme that you've called out in terms of really being able to do the important work and bring your whole selves to the work. So we're honored to be able to be a platform for some of those stories. And that's going to be launching officially on February 14th. And so it'll be ongoing on a 2 or 3 week, frequency basis, keeping adding new interviews to that. So we're excited to share it. And that's what we're hoping that folks will partake with us.
Yeah, it sounds like a very rich offering.
It's tremendous. The wisdom and inspiration that offers and sharing those perspectives and lifting up those voices, we think is something that's really important, and excited to be a part of.
Well, great. Well, thank you so much for your time. It was really a pleasure talking with you. And
thank you so much. Thank you so much. And in terms of real-time strategic planning, we can also provide some information on our website about that.
Oh, great. And right. And so in the link that everyone will have received that actually led them to this video, there'll be the access both to the blog and also a primer about if you want to have kind of if you don't want to get the book, but you want to have the nuts and bolts understanding of real-time strategic planning, there's a resource also that Melissa is making available as well. So
great.
Those links will be in the email.
Thanks so much.
All right. Thank you. Look forward to the next conversation. Okay. Bye.